My name is Princess Amira, and this is the story of how my own sister tried to end my life, how I faced death in the most terrifying way imaginable, and how I found the strength to survive when all hope seemed lost. I need to tell you this story because for too long I've carried this pain in silence. For too long I've hidden the scars, both visible and invisible, that mark my body and soul. But today I speak my truth. I was born into the Saudi royal family, surrounded by golden palaces, servants who catered to every whim, and luxuries most people only dream of. But all that glittered was not gold. Behind the ornate doors and silk curtains of our palace lived a darkness that money could never illuminate, a jealousy so toxic it would nearly cost me everything. My sister Layla was 2 years older than me. We shared the same blood, the same parents, the same upbringing, yet we could not have been more different. From the time we were children, I noticed how her eyes would follow me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When our father praised my piano performance, her smile never reached her eyes. When our mother complimented my kindness toward the servants, Layla's jaw would clench. When suitors came from neighboring kingdoms and their attention turned to me, something dark and twisted began growing in her heart. I loved my sister. I truly did. I would have given her anything she asked for, but the one thing she wanted, I could not give her. She wanted to be me. She wanted my life. She wanted to erase me from existence and step into the space I occupied in our family, in our kingdom, in the world. The day everything changed started like any other. The morning sun painted our palace in hues of amber and gold. I was in the garden, tending to the jasmine flowers that I loved so dearly. Layla approached me with a smile I had learned to distrust, though I desperately wanted to believe it was genuine. "Sister," she said sweetly, "Father wants to see us at the old fortress. He has a surprise for both of us. He's waiting there now." Her voice was like honey, but there was something underneath it, something I couldn't quite name. I should have questioned it. I should have asked why Father would summon us to that abandoned place on the edge of our kingdom, a crumbling structure that hadn't been used in decades. But I was young, only 19 years old, and I wanted so badly to believe that my sister loved me. I wanted to believe that the tension between us could dissolve, that we could be close again like when we were children. So I went with her. We rode in silence, our horses carrying us further and further from the palace, from safety, from everything I knew. The fortress loomed ahead, its ancient stones weathered by time and desert winds. My heart began to beat faster. Something felt wrong. The air itself seemed to whisper warnings I was too naive to hear. "Where is Father?" I asked as we dismounted. Layla's smile finally dropped. In that moment, I saw the truth written across her face, and my blood turned to ice. "Father isn't coming, Amira," she said, her voice now cold as the desert night. "No one is coming. No one even knows you're here." Before I could react, before I could run or scream or defend myself, guards emerged from the shadows. Not our father's guards. Men I didn't recognize. Mercenaries paid in gold that had passed from my sister's hands to theirs. They grabbed me, their grip like iron, and no matter how I struggled, I couldn't break free. "Layla, please," I screamed. "I'm your sister. What are you doing?" She looked at me then with eyes that held no warmth, no mercy, no recognition of the bond we once shared. "You were always the favorite," she hissed. "Always the beautiful one, the kind one, the beloved one. Everyone loves Princess Amira. But what about me? What about Layla? I was invisible next to you. Well, now you'll be the invisible one. Now you'll be nothing but a memory that fades with time." They dragged me down stone steps that descended into darkness, into the bowels of the fortress where ancient dungeons had once held prisoners. But this was no ordinary dungeon. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light of the torches, I heard them. The sound that would haunt my nightmares forever. The roar of lions. This fortress had once been used for executions, for throwing criminals to the beasts as punishment for the gravest crimes. The lion pit had been sealed for generations, but Layla had opened it again. For me. For her own sister. No, 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 please, Layla, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Please don't do this. I'll leave. I'll go away. You'll never see me again. Please. She didn't even look at me as the guards opened the gate. Goodbye, Amira. They threw me in. I'll never forget that fall. Time seemed to slow down as I plummeted into the darkness, the torchlight above me growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. Pain exploded through my body. I lay there in the dirt and the darkness, gasping for breath, tasting blood and sand. And then I heard them moving in the shadows. The lions had been down here for who knows how long, fed just enough to keep them alive but always hungry, always angry. I could hear their breathing, heavy and primal. I could smell them, a musky scent of fur and meat and death. My eyes strained in the darkness, trying to see them, trying to understand where they were, how many there were, how much time I had left to live. One of them roared, and the sound reverberated off the stone walls, filling my ears, my chest, my entire being with pure terror. I scrambled backward until my back hit the wall. There was nowhere to run, no escape, no way out. The gate above had been sealed. Even if I could climb those smooth walls, which I couldn't, I would never reach the top before they reached me. I was going to die here, alone in the darkness, torn apart by beasts, killed by my own sister's jealousy. I thought of my mother, who would wake tomorrow and wonder where I was. I thought of my father, who would search the kingdom for his missing daughter. I thought of everyone I loved and would never see again. And I wept. I wept for the life I would never live, for the children I would never have, for all the moments that would never be mine. But then, something changed inside me. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was a strength I never knew I possessed. Maybe it was the voice of my grandmother, who had died when I was 12, whispering in my ear that I was stronger than I knew. Whatever it was, I stopped crying. I stopped shaking. And I opened my eyes. If I was going to die, I would die fighting. I would not give Layla the satisfaction of my helpless surrender. The lions circled closer. I could see their eyes now, glowing in the darkness like demons. There were 3 of them, 2 males and 1 female, all thin and desperate and hungry. They moved like shadows given flesh, predators who had found their prey. I remembered something my father's huntsman had once told me when I was a child. He said that animals, even the most dangerous ones, can sense fear and confidence. They can sense when you've given up, but they can also sense when you refuse to be prey. I stood up. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest from the fall. But I stood up. I spread my arms wide, and I screamed back at them. Not a scream of fear, but a scream of defiance, of rage, of a human being refusing to go quietly into death. The lions stopped. For a moment, just a moment, they hesitated. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a crack in the inevitability of my death, and I seized it with everything I had. I don't know where the words came from. Perhaps from stories my grandmother told me. Perhaps from some ancestral memory buried deep in my bones. But I began to sing. An old Arabian melody, one my grandmother used to hum when she thought no one was listening. A song about the desert, about survival, about the strength of women who endured when all seemed lost. My voice echoed off the stone walls, mixing with the growls and the breathing of the beasts. I don't know if animals can appreciate music. I don't know if they were confused or curious, or simply paused by something they had never heard before. But they didn't attack. Not yet. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning in that darkness. My throat became raw from singing. My legs trembled from standing. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The moment I showed weakness, the moment I fell silent, I knew they would strike. And then, the female lion did something I will never forget. She approached me slowly, cautiously, and she lay down at my feet. She was exhausted, starving, her ribs showing through her thin coat. She looked up at me with eyes that held no malice, only weariness and pain. I slowly, carefully, lowered myself to the ground. I reached out my hand, trembling, and touched her head. She didn't move. She didn't attack. She closed her eyes. The two males watched from the darkness, uncertain. But they didn't approach. Something had shifted in the dynamic of the pit. I was no longer just prey. I was something else. Something they didn't quite understand. I sat there all night with that lioness, my hand on her head, both of us survivors trying to make it through to morning. I sang when I had the strength. I wept when I didn't. And she stayed with me. This creature who should have killed me but instead became my companion in the darkness. When the first rays of sunlight filtered down through the cracks in the stones above, I saw my situation clearly for the first time. The pit was deep, maybe 30 feet, with walls of smooth stone that would be nearly impossible to climb. The lions were emaciated, clearly neglected, and there, in the corner, was a pile of bones. Human bones. I wasn't the first person thrown down here. I wouldn't be the last unless I found a way out. Days passed. I lost count of how many. The lions and I developed a strange truce. They were too weak to attack aggressively, and I was too stubborn to die. Occasionally a guard would throw down scraps of food, barely enough to sustain me, clearly meant to keep me alive just long enough to suffer. I shared what little I received with the lions. It wasn't kindness. It was strategy. If they were going to kill me, they would have done it already. Now we were all prisoners together. I studied every inch of that pit, looking for a way out. The stones, the walls, the ancient mechanisms that had once operated the gate. I used my jewelry, the golden bangles I had been wearing that day, to dig into the mortar between stones. I tore my dress into strips to create makeshift ropes. I worked until my fingers bled, until my nails broke, until every muscle in my body screamed for rest. And slowly, over days that turned into weeks, I began to see a possibility. A stone near the base of the wall was loose. Behind it, I could feel air moving, a passage, maybe a drainage system, maybe an old escape route, maybe nothing at all. But it was hope, and hope was all I had. I worked at that stone every day, digging, prying, loosening the mortar. The lioness would watch me, sometimes sleeping beside me, sometimes pacing with the males. We were a strange family, bound together by suffering and survival. Finally, after what I later learned was 27 days, the stone moved. Behind it was indeed a passage, narrow and dark, but large enough for me to squeeze through. My heart raced. This was it. This was my chance. But I looked back at the lions. The female who had become my companion looked at me with those golden eyes, and I saw myself reflected in them. We were the same, she and I. Both thrown into darkness by forces beyond our control. Both fighting to survive. Both refusing to surrender. I couldn't leave her. It took me 3 more days to widen the passage enough that the lions could follow. 3 more days of work that left my hands bleeding and raw. 3 more days of guards throwing down scraps and laughing at the princess who lived with beasts. But I did it. The passage led through ancient tunnels that ran beneath the fortress. part of an old water system that had dried up centuries ago. It was tight, claustrophobic, and terrifyingly dark. But it was freedom. The lions followed me, the female leading, the males behind. We crawled through that darkness for hours until finally, we emerged into the desert night. I collapsed in the sand, breathing in the fresh air, staring up at the stars I thought I'd never see again. The lions walked into the desert and disappeared into the darkness. The female looked back at me once, and I swear I saw gratitude in her eyes. Then she was gone. I walked for 3 days through the desert, surviving on cactus water and sheer determination. My beautiful clothes were nothing but rags. My skin was burned by the sun. My feet were torn and bleeding. But I was alive. A Bedouin tribe found me, more dead than alive, and nursed me back to health. They didn't recognize me as a princess. They saw only a woman who had survived something terrible. They gave me water, food, shelter, and asked no questions. I stayed with them for 2 months, healing, recovering, and planning. When I finally returned to the palace, everyone believed I was dead. Layla had told our parents that I had been kidnapped by bandits, that she had tried to save me, but I had been taken into the desert. She played the grieving sister so well that even I might have believed her if I hadn't known the truth. I waited until the entire court was assembled for a celebration in honor of Layla's upcoming coronation. She was going to be named crown princess in my absence. Everything she wanted was finally hers. I walked into that throne room in simple clothes, my hair cut short, my skin bearing the scars of my ordeal. The entire court gasped. Layla's face went white as death. My parents rushed to me weeping, unable to believe I was alive. I told them everything, every detail, every moment in that pit, every betrayal. Layla tried to deny it, but I had taken something from the pit before I left, something undeniable. The royal seal ring that Layla had worn, which had fallen into the pit when she had looked down at me one last time. The guards she had paid confessed when faced with execution. The truth came out like water breaking through a dam. Layla was banished from the kingdom, stripped of her title, and sent away with nothing. My parents begged me to show mercy, to imprison her instead, but I refused. I wanted her to live with what she had done. I wanted her to wander the world knowing that her jealousy had cost her everything, while the sister she tried to destroy had survived and thrived. That was 7 years ago. I am 26 now. I rule fairly and with compassion. I have never married, though many have asked. I have dedicated my life to helping those who cannot help themselves, to being a voice for the voiceless, to ensuring that no one in my kingdom is ever thrown into darkness and forgotten. Sometimes late at night, I still hear the roar of lions in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up in that pit, surrounded by darkness and fear. But then I remember that I survived. I remember that I was strong enough to face death and clever enough to escape it. I remember that even in the darkest place imaginable, I found a way to live. My sister wanted to destroy me, to erase me from existence. Instead, she forged me into something stronger than she could ever imagine. She threw me to the lions, but the lions didn't break me. Nothing ever will again. This is my story. This is my truth. And I share it with you today because I want everyone who has ever faced betrayal, who has ever been pushed into darkness by someone they trusted, who has ever felt like giving up, to know that survival is possible, strength is possible, victory is possible. You are stronger than you know. You are braver than you believe. And even when thrown to the lions, you can emerge victorious. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if it inspired you, if it gave you hope, please subscribe to this channel and share it with others who might need to hear that they can survive anything. Your support means everything, and it helps me continue sharing stories of survival, strength, and the unbreakable human spirit. Remember, the darkness may be deep, but the dawn always comes. You just have to survive long enough to see it. I am Princess Amira, and I am a survivor.